Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming and joining us today. We're going to be looking at avoiding account engagement brackets Pardot, because I can't quite give up on it just yet. Personalisation SOS scenarios. So just a quick introduction to the two of us first. So I am Richard Feist. I've got 6 years of experience in Marketing Cloud account engagement and Salesforce, 5 times certified, a 2023 Salesforce Marketing Champion, and a senior CRM and marketing automation strategist at Secante.
And I'm Nathalie. I've got 5+ years experience in Salesforce and in account engagement. I'm 7 times Salesforce certified. I'm a solution engineer also at Secante. I'm based in Northampton, UK. So,
what we're going to be covering today for you is a quick overview of actually what personalisation is within account engagement, going into a bit more depth on personalisation in emails, forms and landing pages, how we can identify issues and how we can actually preempt them and start to avoid them before they become issues for us, and a little bit of an open question and answer at the end as well.
So what is personalisation in account engagement, or Pardot? So first of all, what is dynamic content? Dynamic content allows you to include differing content to a specific audience based on the value of a field on the prospect record. For example, if you were using dynamic content based on the country field and that prospect was from Ireland, you could dynamically show text or images related to the prospect's country, like displaying a hero image of Ireland if a prospect was from there. HTML, on the other hand, allows you to show the value of that prospect field in an email or a landing page. So a traditional example, which I'm sure we've already seen, is addressing a recipient by their first name. When we're looking at snippets, they are more of our static content. So when we've looked at dynamic content and HTML, snippets we can use for reusable content blocks. So essentially where we've got content that may be reused over multiple emails or landing pages. Common example of those would be if you have a list of all your upcoming webinars listed in a snippet, you wouldn't have to go in and change your individual email templates. You could instead just edit the snippet there.
Perfect. So I have pre-sent a poll out there and some people have answered it. So I'll give everyone about 30 seconds to just have a look and see. There's 2 polls on there because I've got really into this poll business now that I've been given a good method to do it instead of having to do it on slides and the show of hands. This is just to try and get a bit of an understanding from yourselves around, have you used any of these before? Are you new to the concept of personalisation? And if you are, that is absolutely fine as well. So I'll just give it another couple of couple of seconds. Okay, perfect. So what I can see is a good mix of people who have used dynamic content, which is great. There's some fantastic applications for dynamic content. HTML has been used as well. No one for snippets, which is an interesting takeaway in itself, and some for none of the above as well. So we've got a really good mix, which is great. So we're going to try and cover and give examples of all of these as we continue to go through.
So what happens when it goes wrong? So what are our SOS scenarios? Now, I'm sure it will be no surprise, even as a recipient, to see some of these. So, for example, we have our lovely email that I received with blank, comma, we couldn't do it without you, and the traditional hi, blank, comma. We've also got no subject, and one of my favourites, insert name in a signature. So we're going to go through how to avoid some of these scenarios as we go through.
Okay, so a second poll, just to keep you really on your phones and fully engaged. A quick poll was about, what might be stopping you from using further personalisation? If you are using some already, what's stopping you from using other methods of it? So we've got experience of the tool, internal processes and requirements, just playing it a little bit safe sometimes. And then there might be some other reasons as well. Okay, perfect. It looks like mainly verging on experience of the tool, and some other reasons is a bit of a wear there, so that's absolutely fine. Hopefully after this you'll have a little bit more of an understanding of what you can do with the tool, and some things where you can start to dip your toe into the water to have a bit of a look into it. And if you do have any other questions after that as well, we have a bit of time at the end for a Q&A, and we'll be hanging around for a little bit if you want to ask us some questions as well.
Okay, so let's take a look at some of the tools related to email. So let's look at some email examples of how we can personalize the content that we're sending out to our receivers. So here's an example email. We've got use of the tools that we've already mentioned throughout. If we look at dynamic content, we've used a combination of that HTML and snippets in this email. The dynamic content has been utilized in the hero image. We've also got dynamic content to update the selections based on interest. Hopefully you guys can see that okay. And we've got HTML alongside dynamic content to actually reflect that field, so the attendee interest field. So the dynamic content is pulling through those recommendations for sessions based on that field value. So alongside that, we've just got the HTML and the attendee interest. We've also got our classic hi recipient first name. We've also got snippets in here for the actual body of the text. So using the button below to jump into the event. And we can also use HTML dynamic content to update text, color, or the URL link that we're actually navigating to. When we're sending our email, something to bear in mind is that we can also customize the sender that we're actually sending from based on our prospects. So this can actually be based on our prospect information. So a typical use case for this is if it's an existing client mail, you may potentially look at using the sender to be their account owner in Salesforce there. We also have our subject box, obviously not to be neglected, not to have no subject in it, to avoid those SOS scenarios. But we can also add HTML snippets and dynamic content to our subject line with the advanced subject composer. So something to bear in mind there, we don't need to just be dynamic in our emails themselves, we can also put that into the subject.
Okay, so a little bit of a look at some Pardot form applications of these personalization methods. So this is just a very basic contact us form, and you can see we have some applications here for some of those methods that we've talked to as well. So example, HTML to personalize the top of the contact us form. Now, of course, that's not going to be there for everyone, right? Not everyone that comes to this contact us form, we're going to have that data available to us already to do it. So the idea here could be is that it's a contact us form where we are pushing people to that we already know their data of. We can also look at the logic within HTML to make sure that if we don't know that information about someone, if we don't have their first name, then we populate it with an alternative as well. So it would just be hi there. Very simple way around that, right? If we don't have that, if we don't have the data available to us, we need to find replacements and make sure that it looks good. Otherwise, we go back to that SOS scenario on the email that we showed at the start where it's hi blank comma. Worst thing you can possibly see in any kind of email personalization. It's the first thing that people will put on Twitter if they see it in an email from you, or the first thing that they'll call out and message you back. I'm sure we've all had people message us back and tell us, I think you'll find there's something wrong in that email that you've just sent me. So we want to avoid those situations. We can also use HTML inside of our dynamic content blocks if the person is a known prospect. So what that relates to is, as I was saying there, we've got a dynamic content block. We can still add the HTML in there if we have that information. So having data, and you're going to hear this a lot today in a lot of the other sessions as well, data that is up to date, clean and accurate is going to really help with this personalization. And then lastly, one of the other things that's been added in here is we can use an enhancement of the data we already have and capture additional data. One value here we've got is let's use this field around what your preferred language is to allow us to serve you content off the back of that in a way that you want to receive it, right? I'll step aside for the photos. This here is going to mean that we have a data point to allow us to do enhanced customization and personalization moving forward. So another example of that is dynamic content blocks. Now, some of us may be familiar with hidden fields on forms, looking to try and capture additional data points. One that I really love to use there is UTM values, a whole nother talk for a whole nother time. But the principle here is they're hidden fields, right? We need to find a way to populate those hidden fields. We need to probably do it with some code if it's on a website. So what we can actually do is add that code in a dynamic content block. Now what that means is if that code only needs to be updated in one place with the dynamic content, one place to manage that entire code, instead of having to go to every form individually and updating that code, another application of a dynamic content block, it means we have some information available to us that can be reciprocal. Okay, and following on from forms, we've got landing pages. So what we can see as well with the landing page, and this is going to follow on from that personalization data point we got with the language. The Spanish language was picked up as my preferred language. Perfect, okay? So what we do then is we actually update the form to a completely different form and serve a different form with the same content, but in a way that I have indicated to the business I would like to receive that. Right? This level of personalization is going to be great if we have the data points to do it. So you can see it there. We've got sort of a bit of an English translation of that as well, so you can see the kind of message we're doing there. But we now know that Richard wants to receive his communication in Spanish as much as possible. So where applicable, we will do that, an enhancement of that personalization.
So now we've seen those tools and actions, how can we plan for success with personalisation? Because it is going to need that element of planning. But first, why does it fail? So Rich has already alluded to having no data. If we have no data in our fields that we're looking to insert using HTML or as our reference for dynamic content, this is going to lead to an SOS scenario, unless managed appropriately. The second one, kind of leading on from no data, is if we have incorrect data. So if we have misformatted information, if we have random symbols where different data points should be, if we've copied and pasted and we've got bad data in Pardot rather than having no data, that's also going to limit our ability to personalise the content and our assets. The third one is user error. So when we're looking at kind of HTML and when we're just looking generally around our assets in general, there is an element of user error that could impact our ability to personalise what we're sending out. So if we've got an added or deleted bracket, if we didn't set a default value, that could impact our ability to personalise properly.
Okay, so now we know some of the things we need to think about before that, specifically around data and user error, making sure we're up to date on those. We want to also have a look at the actual planning process before we put some of these into practice. So if we're using them already, fantastic, but if we're not as well, both those situations, there is an application to make sure we are planning the execution of when we're using the right content in the right place, in the right manner. So what do we actually want to do? A classic question of what is it you actually want to do? One of my favorite sort of quotes around that is the one about a spade and a hole. The client says, I really want a spade. And you go, oh, you don't ask a question, you give them a spade. But actually, you should be asking that question of what do you want to do with it? Oh, they want to dig a hole. Right, well, why don't we get a JCB in to dig that hole for you instead, right? Make it easy. So asking that question at the start of what is it you're actually trying to do, that's a great starting point. What assets do you need? Before you start deploying this, you might need multiple email templates. You might need multiple forms, going back to the language variants of forms. You don't just want an English form, you might want a Spanish, a German, a French, etc. form. So knowing what you need beforehand and giving that to maybe your designer, maybe it's you yourself that builds them as well within your org. However that is, you need to make sure that you have them available to you before you start doing it. There's no point in putting in personalization around language preferences and capturing that data point and doing absolutely nothing with it. Do you have the data you need to make it happen? We've been doubling down on this, but just to keep it going again, having the data points to make your personalization is a must. If you don't have them, you cannot personalize your journey. And then how are you going to test this, right? Everything we do, everything that we build, we need to test somehow. We need to make sure that it's working as expected and making sure that it is fit for purpose.
So let's talk about testing. Obviously, test, and get again is what we're going for here. We don't want to encounter those high comma blanks. We don't want blank, we couldn't do it without you. It's not a good impression to have, especially on your prospects or existing client base, to know kind of what you're doing there. So, couple of pointers here around testing. Always test in incognito. That's ensuring that we're not cookied or logged in elsewhere and we're seeing something that actually we were bound to see because of that cookie, because Pardot already knows that information. We want to see what someone we don't know is going to see in that form, in an email, for example. You can also set up a list of internal prospects to use as your test list. And one of the ways you can do that is leveraging Gmail functionality. I don't know if any of you use this currently internally, but putting a plus and then a value and then you're at gmail.com will allow you to set up different email addresses that are unique, so different prospects that you can have within Pardot, which will allow you to have different values. You're not having to find all of the personal emails that you've got. You can actually test and also have kind of a plan to your testing as well. Don't forget a default value when you're using HTML and deep dynamic content. Instead of relying on things like hi there, which we've probably already seen if we're not known, maybe there's something a little bit more unique to your organization that you can actually refer to people as. So for example, hi fellow trailblazer just adds a little bit more of personalization where there isn't any. And finally, utilize our preview and testing tools, making sure we're using those buttons, making sure we're seeing how our content's rendering in what we're trying to achieve.
Okay, perfect. So looking at testing our dynamic content in the emails that we have available to us, right? So the first point there is using previews to send to a test list as well. So using the preview option, seeing it how we expect to see it, and then sending to a test list. Nathalie's already alluded to that, to making sure we have a test list that's built out with multiple prospects in it, right? We don't want to see one particular way that personalization is going to work and not account for the other scenarios. We want to cover all those scenarios, so we are aware of what is going to happen based on the different data points that we have. Right? We also want to make a copy of the dynamic content email to test. We want to make sure that it's not just that exact template that's working, but we want to make sure that it's applicable across everything that we're doing. Validate the different variations and make sure things render properly. So I've alluded to that already, ever so slightly, around making sure that all our variants are covered, making sure that we're not just expecting one particular method, we're accounting for the others. What I'd also add here as well is getting another set of eyes on this is really key, right? We may have built this personalization and automation out ourselves, right? We have in our mind how it's going to work. What we don't know is how someone who has no idea what we've built is going to interact and use this. So getting someone else in the team to, oh, there's an email gone into there, can I add you to a test list? Can you test this for me? Can you have a look at it? Super important, because we may have gone down an absolute rabbit hole tunnel of this is going to work exactly as how I want it to, and it's perfect. I'm always right. I always build it right. And in this situation, I could say that. I could send it to Natalie, and she has a look at it and goes, Rich, you've forgotten about X, Y, Z. And I'll go, yeah, not so perfect in this situation. I've been kind of absorbed and I'm too close to it. So getting another set of eyes on it to validate your work as well. Following that kind of application and how people do it when, you know, we deploy things through change sets, when we deploy things through DevOps, the same application should be being used here as well. Getting someone else to validate what we've done, make sure it's right, is key.
So when we're looking at testing HTML in email, we also want to review our dynamic list for anyone who's not meeting that criteria. So anyone that we have, we are expecting to see that we're not seeing, or anyone that's got kind of missing data. We've also got the ability to kind of add that backup in there. We've already talked about not leaving that blank, but we also want to test that blank. We want to test that default value. We want to see how that looks. We want to make sure that that's looking correct. And then similarly, using the preview button and sending it to a test list is super important. I think, you know, a CEO is going to forgive you if you send out something with missing data to a test list, not to your entire contact base. So always consider testing, make sure you're happy with something before you're sending that out to your prospects.
Some additional things on top of what we've already covered to keep in mind, and as a bit of a recap of what we've covered as well. Personalization requires strategy and good data. I'm sorry that we're repeating it again, but good data is going to be so key to everything you do. Having that and applying a little bit of strategy, as we said, actually planning out, I need 4 emails for 4 different languages. I need a landing page for each of those. I need a form and I need 3 dynamic content blocks. Whatever that needs to be, plan it out before you start trying to deliver. It means you spend less time scrabbling about to try and achieve it later on, and it gives you more of a strategic view. You can go, I have my email content and all the personalization within it planned out for the next month, for the next 3 months, and it's going to stand you in a lot of stead moving forward. Bad data or no data can really harm the brand when we're attempting the personalization in our emails and our digital experiences. Mentioned it at the start with some of the examples we had. People will jump on any kind of mistakes like that you make, right? We see it all the time as marketers on other brands as well, and we should be really focused on not making those mistakes. Check your account engagement Pardot tier, right? If you're on the plus or higher packages, you're going to be able to start leveraging some of those dynamic content and some of those other features, right? So make sure you're aware of that. Connected campaigns. This is a great thing. Again, we could have talks for days just on connected campaigns, but they are a requirement to start leveraging snippets, right? They need to be in place for that. HTML is enabled for all new accounts that have been created since 2019. If yours is older, you may need to update from your Pardot merge language if you haven't done so already, right? So if you want to start leveraging that, that's something that you need to look at. Natalie has mentioned it already before, but always testing incognito, so there's no cookies, and with a cookied prospect. So you can experience both of the situations that we have. So you have one where the personalization will not work and the personalization will work. Leverage that preview tab on emails for the dynamic content testing tool. That is always key. It's going to show you initially what you're going to see in that preview, give you, give you what you need to feel comfortable doing that before you proceed and start sending test lists out. You might catch something yourself, which you will then be like, I'll make that change before I send a test list out, because these 3 people on that test list are going to be like, I can see there's a problem here, and you're going to be like, okay, well, I should have caught that first. Know the difference between our global default values and the templated HTML backup defaults. So what this means is our default values, which we can set on a field level within Account Engagement Pardot, as our kind of default mail merge values, and some of those default values that we have on fields, and what we might have set within our templates. So setting the individual HTML, your if quotes and those sorts of things, when you're setting them on individual templates, making sure that you know that that might not necessarily match up to what your default values are overall across your entire system. It is okay if they're different as well. They don't have to match, right? If you're specifically looking at something in particular on this template, that's fine as well. Queues in Salesforce, when someone is assigned to a queue, they do not have signatures, right? So if you want to personalize what is coming out from a queue in Salesforce, so when we assign our prospects in Account Engagement Pardot, and they're assigned to a queue, if we try personalization with a signature of some kind, whether it's as a snippet or we have it set up to be dynamic content or HTML to say who it's come from, we need to make sure we set up an identity user to handle that function for us, right? Because otherwise it's going to be a blank scenario for us. And last, test that HTML syntax whenever you can, making sure any if statements you have or any alternate values that you're going to be pulling in are actually working as you expect as well.
Okay, so a couple of resources for further reading. Just at the top of the call, we noticed this room, we're not really using snippets as a whole. So a couple of things to point out here. DuckDuckGoose, How to Play with Pardot Snippets is a great article to just get you thinking about some of the use cases of using snippets and adopting them, just saving you some time, being a little bit more efficient and making sure we're not seeing content for webinars that happened 4 months ago, because we have that in an email template. Another one, obviously lots of resources here, how to use dynamic content, making sure we're using HTML and Pardot correctly, so useful to have a look at there.
Okay, thank you for listening to us talk for 25-30 minutes now. Is there any questions that anyone has that they want to say out loud? If not, they can just ask us afterwards and come up shyly and ask us, not if they don't want to ask in front of anyone, but we have a little bit of time, I think, if you wanted to ask anything now. No? Yes?
Ask if it's available for the Lightning email builder. So I don't think they're up.
No. The Lightning email builder is not finished yet, is a politically correct term, I think. They have a great function, right? They are good if you want to make it as easy as possible for people that are not trained to build emails, right? It does have a function in our current repertoire of emails. If you want something more complex and you want more personalization, I'm going to say for now, you stick with the Pardot, inside Pardot email builder, right? It's going to give you that ability to enhance and personalize your journey so much more. You have so much more options to vary it up. I would stick with that for now. The Lightning email builder will get there. I just have no time scale and no ability to look into the future on that at this point. Yes? So yeah, it is there, but it's not there. If in that same sense that we're expecting it to be, yeah. Anyone for anything else? Yes. Put the resource slide back up. Yeah. They are links, yes. So I think the slide deck will be shared afterwards, is my understanding, with attendees. I'm looking around, hoping that someone here would know. I believe they are, so they should come through as well. But most of them, if you take a quick picture, most of them have excellent SEO rankings or SEO access compared to some with some other named products that we have that are very generic. Anyone else at all? Okay, perfect. Well, all we can say is thank you for listening to us after lunch. I know it's a tough slot to try and engage with a little bit. We've all got a bit of food on our mind, right? Or we're a little bit full and thinking a nap could be quite nice. So thank you for bearing with us. And as I said, if you do have any questions after, please do come up and ask. But thank you.
Flowsome is an all-in-one DevSecOps security automation and data management solution for Salesforce that will help you regain full control of your Salesforce instance. With Flowsome, secure and accelerate your entire development lifecycle. Keep control of your data with data backup, recovery, archival, seeding, and more. And maintain cybersecurity posture while bringing governance to your platforms with an adaptive framework. Check out Flowsome on the Salesforce App Exchange to learn more or visit flowsome.com.